Okay, so I'm gonna try to do Ancient Battles Deluxe here now. As usual, I read the rules, and I'm gonna work my way through them with you. I may redo them. The reason is this: although Charles Cab has done what is probably a much better kind of rules introduction than I would usually do, I looked at it and the sound is very scratchy. We'll see how badly I work through this. This is a review copy, so I feel a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more of a desire to do things right, you know. But, well, I'm unlikely to do things very right no matter how you do it. So we'll give this a shot and see how we get through it. And then if it's pretty bad after I've played a few times, maybe I'll redo. But let's go through this because I think this was sent to me largely because I've done so many of the Great Battles of History games. And I have a definite interest in Ancients. And, well, I guess there's kind of a, hey, if we can even convince Enrico to do this and to enjoy this, it'll show, it to a lot of other people. I have my misgivings, of course, because these are tiny little maps. Tiny maps, and there aren't going to be a lot of scenarios, a lot of pieces in any given scenario. But let's see what we got. First of all, what do we have? Well, we have your Victory Point Games counters, which work out pretty well once you trim some of the excess off them. I think this is probably prior to their laser printer. They definitely came with a lot of flash on them. You've got the rule book, which isn't terribly long, but it's fairly detailed. That kind of surprised me. I wasn't really expecting, so much rules in VPG production. And then you look, and there are actually a decent number of pieces on the board in this one. This is Arsu, Bannockburn, a lot smaller. Yeah, we'll see all these when I actually play them. Legnano, which I didn't even know. The Pope against Barbarossa, nice. Very, very few pieces, though, on the board on this one. If I zoom in, you can actually see that better. Let's take a look at some of these others. Take another look at our Sooth, just to see that's a decent-sized battle. Hatton, well, Hatton should be pretty small. Charonea, which I have not yet gotten to over in the Alexander ones, the Great Battles of Alexander. So we'll see how that works out. Granicus, again, from the Alexander era. Leuctra, Thebes versus Sparta. I remember playing a Theban Spartan game, maybe from Great Battles of Alexander, I'm not sure. Long time ago. Here's a Hittites 1 Kadesh. We've done that over in Chariots of Fire. And then advertisements. Cool. And this is an expandable game. I know there are many modules to it. They sent me one to take a look at it. It's going to cover really all of sort of the pre-gunpowder era. And it doesn't have a lot of command control type rules. It's more a lighter game on, say, the same scale as the Men of Iron type stuff, but it has a different focus, and we'll see how that kind of works out. Yeah, I'm being very over here we have the tables that are going to be in the game, and we'll kind of look at them as we hit things. Sequence of play is on each map. That's always helpful. And one clear map and one not so clear map, but still not terribly crowded. And hopefully these will all be able to cover most of the battles. For the counters themselves, you have a lot of these little yellow and red things which mark that units have been used. You have some leaders, a bunch of informational counters, and then for different types of units. And again, because of the wide span of history, they're fairly generic, you have things like heavy infantry, well, wait, medium infantry, heavy infantry. You got your phalanxes, though. You've got knights and heavy horse units, which I've got all mixed up in different piles for some reason, because I was sorting while I was watching the news. Okay. And your leader counters, well, we can take a quick look. You've got your normal combat strength, movement allowance, and you've got kind of an archery ability up here, along with range in the hex. Your leaders have a value, which is going to be kind of a force multiplier there. Anything else I really need? You got some distinguishment of cavalry in the little green box here. You have some special rules for that, of course. Knights don't look like cavalry. Cool. All right. And let's see. We're going over things. Cav unit types. Now, knights are listed as cav unit types, but they don't have the green box. The green box has certain effects in the rules. You also have these camps, and I think there's wagons, war wagons, something like that. All right. So, looking at the sequence of play, well, let's look at it on here because it's easier there. So, one of the ideas of this game is leaders are kind of things that you put on your pieces to activate them, essentially. A little different feel from what you're used to, where leaders are just on the board commanding a command. So we're going to see kind of how that works. It's going to have an army morale, essentially, through the panic check rules as armies get weakened. Now, unlike many games, it's not just a matter of, oh yeah, the army's broken. You actually play out those routes, which could cause both sides to rout and then keep things in place. Then you're going to make a roll for initiative, essentially. There is more to it than that. As you can see, it says post-bidding. Place leaders. Each player is putting their leaders on the board, and then the person with the initiative decides who gets to take their turn. And then each player alternates taking an action. There are only four kinds of actions here: move, fire, rally, and then panic movement, which isn't really one of the. There's only really three. The panic movement is something you inflict on your opponent, which affects his disordered units or panic. I think disordered, disrupted, one of those. So then here we get very procedural. Remove all yellow markers. Yellow markers gets placed when you do movement type actions. So you can't move the same unit again. And you just use these little things to indicate, hey, I moved. So you do have kind of a turn structure here. And then each player gets to choose individual units to engage in melee. You roll on the tables. There's a lot of calculation that's going to be involved in that. We'll touch on that. I put everything off until the next 10 minutes. And then you come, as you do combats, you'll be marking things with the little red markers. As you do movement, you do the yellow marker. As you do combat, you put red markers on to indicate the same unit can't attack or be attacked again. And then you do some game end and some little bookkeeping stuff, including removing the action markers, the red ones, setting up for the next turn, essentially. What do these little die rolls mean? Damned if I know. They may be an early turn end marker. That's what they kind of look like there. Okay, well, let's look at the different things we have here. Army panic check. Remember, that happens second here. Removing leaders, you just pull them all off the board. Army panic check. Well, as each combat unit is destroyed, you're going to track those losses, and eventually they hit a certain limit, okay? And then the army has panicked. Alternatively, though, the army can panic if all the leaders are destroyed. Hey, I think I'm doing pretty reasonably here so far. I haven't even gone off on a major tangent yet. What this means, when you hit the panic, all the good ordered units that are on the board get flipped over. And that's how we mark that a unit is disordered. And it's a little weaker on that side. Well, maybe a lot weaker in this case, huh? Yeah. Okay. Half strength. Okay. So those aren't step losses on the other side. But then, that's a one-time effect when the army panics. It just, is breaking at that point, but you could still see some rearguard actions or whatever, or the army could sort of even turn around, I guess. So in order to cover that, there's a long-term effect, which is once per turn, your enemy can say, I'm moving all your pieces in panic movement. And basically they try to run them off the board, off your retreat. If you retreat, that doesn't really, I don't think that affects losses. I don't remember. But getting panic, there are very few victory point features in this game. I think there's like 4 things that can cause victory points. One of them is panicking the enemy army. That's one of your goals in the battle. To determine initiative in the game, okay? Oh, I don't know if I have it here. These come with there it is, the tiniest little die. My wife loves those. They get caught in my hand and I can't roll them, so I'll use something bigger. But it's all packaged for easily shipping and easy transport. All right, so where do we go here? So you roll a die to see your initiative value. Whoever has the highest initiative value will have the ability to determine who goes first, I guess. If the values are tied, whoever had initiative last keeps it. And if it's the first turn of the battle, well, that's preset by the player order. Player side A gets it. Now, after you roll to see who the initiative is, you're going to be able to spend these CPs, command points, over here. And you get a collection of these. And when you spend one, you say, I want the initiative. Okay. Well, the other guy can then spend one back. And you can just keep bidding them back and forth. Or you can decide, well, if he actually wants it and can beat me, maybe I want to hold my command points because they do have other uses. So, if you win the roll, or if you win the bidding after the roll, you get the initiative. Basically, the bidding wins out on that. Okay, then we go to the activation step. And during this, each player is going to be spending one of their command points to do something. Now, do something can be moving an individual unit or moving a formation. Formations, okay, alternatively, you can choose not to spend a command point. We'll get to formations in a moment. You can not spend a command point and pass, but if both people pass, then we end the activations and we go directly to the melee step. So anytime you pass, you're basically saying, I'm good with the board the way it is. You ready? All right. Okay. So the person who has initiative gets to choose who goes first. And that person chooses a particular combat unit or a leader who doesn't have a little yellow marker on him to indicate that he has. These indicate that he's gone already, so you can only activate each one once. That selected unit or the entire formation is allowed to choose one of the actions: rally, move, or fire. I guess we got to talk about formation. A formation is defined somewhere. Here we go. We'll get to it in a moment. Then each activated unit completes its orders, and it gets a little yellow marker to indicate it can't do anything. If a formation moves, not only the leader gets a yellow marker, but all the units that he commanded get one as well. Now, when you select a leader for... Hey, how do you get these things? I don't know. We'll have to look that up at some point if we don't get to it. Command points. No. 2 things marked CP. That's nice. Yeah, I'm not sure how you get your... Receive command points. This happens during the first step here, the remove leaders step. It's not filled out there. Oh no, it's at the 3rd step. Receive command points. So you get command points equal to your leaders plus a number based on this command table here. Hey, I got a zoom feature. I don't have to actually push it all the way in there. So you can see you can get up to 3 additional. And you get 1 for each leader you have. So if you want to individually activate a unit, that's fine. But you probably won't be able to move all your units if you do that. You're going to want to try to keep your formations and move them. All right, let's go back here. How do you define a formation? It's a group of units mutually supportive without action markers, where each unit is adjacent to one other unit in the formation, and one unit within the formation is stacked with a leader. There's more than that. Okay. So in the case of a move order, all the units in the formation have to be facing the same way. You can't have, pieces. And facing is going to be the hex sides instead of the corners. Well, why don't we take all one side? You can't. You have to be positioned kind of like this, not like this. But when you actually do the movement, they don't have to maintain the formation in any way. So every unit in the formation has to do the same action, a rally, move, or fire. And you need not activate all units within the formation. You just have to be able to define the formation. The way that's worded, I would guess, if you've got a formation, I don't know what MMs are, like this, and we'll put a leader on top because that's necessary, and you decide to activate that formation, or the leader and his formation, you could move just this one, and then of course you'd need the little activation markers. I guess for the units themselves, I don't know how that stacking is going to work. Alrighty. And as you move each unit, you get a little yellow flag on them. And the leader will also get one in a formation movement. So rally allows you to take a damaged unit and flip it over to its undamaged side. And it looks like it's as simple as that. And of course you would get the little yellow marker when you do that. That's with an individual unit. If you want to order a formation to rally, though, you have to do a rally attempt. And in order to do a attempt, you have to roll less than or equal to its disordered combat strength. So you can see that's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to rally a formation of units, but you might still get more of them rallied that way. And is there any modifier there? There's 2 subtracted if you're in the same hex as a leader. There's 1 subtracted if you're next to a leader, a friendly leader. A 1 will always succeed and a 6 will always fail, even if your modifiers would screw you up there. Or help you, actually. Okay, movement. Well, for movement, you trace using your movement allowance, and so these guys move 3 each, right? And movement's a little complicated in this sucker. Facing is very important in this game. When you declare a movement, then let's see how you move. So before or immediately after, basically once per hex, and this can be at the beginning and the end of your movement as well as each hex you traverse, you're allowed to shift 1 facing direction for free. But then you have to pay. And the cost is one movement point. If you want to turn more than one hex side, it costs one movement point to spin as many as you like in a hex. Well, there aren't a lot of them. There's only 2 more after that maximum. But you can basically face directly to your rear or to the side for 1 movement point. But you can reface like this for free. Then when you move into a new hex, you can continue turning. You're not allowed to move through enemy units. No biggie there. You can move through friendly units, but when you do so, this will disrupt both units as you move through it. There's no stacking in this game, but there's this kind of, as you move through a unit, you can disrupt your own units. That's important, especially when you're doing this kind of route movement. If there's no way out, you run through your enemy, or through your buddy. Looking to see what the zones of control. Yeah, zones of control are going to be sticky. They stop you when you hit them. Let's see how sticky. They look like they're not sticky at all, or they're completely sticky, which is there's no infiltration. If you begin a turn in an enemy zone of control, you cannot enter another zone of control hex immediately. You may disengage from combat, or from a zone of control. And zones of control are only in the frontal 3 hexes. So I'd be exposing one here, but not behind me. So you may leave an enemy zone of control. So I could spend 1 to go like this, and then run away for 2. But when I do so, I get a little red marker instead of a yellow one. That means not only have I done my movement action, or my action for the turn, but I've also spent my combat action. I'm not allowed to attack. Somebody can still attack me, I think. Clarification, zones of control don't extend across rivers, but they do go across stone bridges and fords. Great. Some rules about entering reinforcements. That's, you know, if the hex is blocked, you're actually allowed to kind of deploy off map. Maps are pretty plain. The terrain that you're next to will extend off map, and there's some limitations to that. That's pretty unlikely to be a big deal. There's a terrain effects chart, which should be no surprise to anyone, and that tells you the movement point costs to move through things. Oh look, there's a little red dot that says must stop upon entry. Non-light units will be disordered. Does that also give you a red dot? Interesting. Maybe. Doesn't look like it. It looks like that's just a way of indicating what happens there instead of some color coding for that. We got some specifics here. B says you can cross rivers only at bridges or fords. A wood bridge supersedes stream effect hexes. I don't know. We'll see that on the battles. Okay, so then there's this special kind of movement, which is panic movement, which is where your opponent decides to move your pieces. When he declares a panic move and spends a command point, one of his command points, in order to move your pieces, okay, he gets to move every single disordered piece that you have. And he's going to run these toward the edge of the board, and they can't push through their own units unless there's no other option, is basically the thing. They can't go charging towards their units to try to force themselves into a position where they have to disrupt them. No biggie there. They also get a little red dot on them to indicate after they do panic movement so that they don't attack after panicking. Okay. I think we're going to need 2 videos for this, so I'm going to split it here. Alrighty, let's go to ranged combat then. In ranged combat, well, some of the units, like this guy, have a little arrow, which is indicating how many dice of ranged combat ability they have, and then they have a number in a hex, which is how many hexes away they can fire. when you do a fire action or a formation fire, whatever units are involved get to play a fire, and they'll be getting a red marker at the end of that because they won't be able to melee. They have to have a missile rating and a range. You count the range in hexes. You can only fire through your front hexes. You have to determine a line of sight, which can't go through anything, basically. Including a combat unit, you cannot shoot over your units, but you can shoot down the hex spine if there's nothing on one side. Okay, so you designate which units are attacking what. And the way combat in this, every form of combat is kind of clever and a little different from other games. And it's going to... Victory Point games tend to make this, we're doing something very different. These are always clever little designs that don't follow the standard procedures. So there's always this little trick in a VPG game, I think. But in this case, we'll see how their combat system works. It is a little different from everything else that I've seen. So what you do is the defender is going to roll a die for the target unit of the attack and add to this the ranged combat defense. Now that's going to be a little number here that you don't see because it's not on that unit. Let's find a unit that has one. How about this horse? He has a ranged defense of +1. So he's going to be presumably a little better at taking ranged combat. You also get terrain modifiers, which will be marked here under the missile defense column. All pretty simple. And the attacker is going to get a number of dice equal to the number of arrows he has. Now what he does is he rolls all those dice and takes the highest one. Okay? So it just gives you more of a chance of doing damage. He adds 1 for each supporting archer that's involved in that attack. So 1, if you're attacking with just 1 unit, you're not going to get that. But if you do a formation fire, each supporting unit can add 1 to your die roll. That can be pretty big. It looks like you have to declare all that before you fire, though. So you can't look and see what the defense is and try to beat that. And what you have to do is you have to get an attack value that's greater than the missile defense value. And if you do, you cause a disorder. And if the unit's already disordered, you eliminate it. And then, of course, will be tracked on the casualty table then. And, of course, you get a red marker, as I said. Now, some units are going to have this rapid fire ability, which means that they get to fire more than once when they take a fire action. They can do this by spreading their fire out on the, as far as I can tell, they can do it even to the same unit, on the same or different units. The restrictions to rapid fire, if you spread it out to multiple die rolls, that's one of your options, is only the first die roll can receive support from other units. Now, these will each be resolved as in the base case. The other option is you can do what's an enhanced attack, which lets you take your rapid fire. Let's say you have 2 times rapid fire. I don't know if we have longbowmen marked in here. I don't think we do. I think it's just by scenario whether they're allowed to have rapid fire. Let's say you have two times rapid fire. That means you'd get twice as many dice on your roll. That doesn't sound as valuable as being able to roll against 2 different attacks, even against the same unit. But if you think you're going to need a high number, if you're facing something that has a likely, I don't think I'd do it against a +1, but maybe these numbers go higher. You can see these, they get +2 when you flip them over. They get better as they disperse. If you're facing knights, that's a -1. And no effect. That sounds like it's going the wrong way. The defender rolls a die and adds the result to the unit's ranged combat. If the missile attack is greater than the missile defense, the target takes a hit. I wonder why disordered units... I can understand why disordered units would be harder to hurt. I wonder why knights are so easy to hurt compared to light cavalry. Well, they're slower. Okay, you can shoot the horses. A little iffy on that. How are the heavies? Yeah, these are horse archers, not heavy cav. Here's your heavy cav. And they flip over and they get a little better. So, yeah, it looks like the heavier the cav, the less resistant they are to missile fire. I'm not sure I buy that, but okay. So yeah, you have that option with the rapid fire if you have it. You may want to be rolling more dice. Usually I think you probably will want to take more attacks though. Alright, on to melee combat. Now that is its own stage. Activation of fire combat is just is something that happens in your activation. When you start melee combat, well, the first thing you do is you remove all the yellow markers. Everything that's moved, it's not going to get another chance to move except by retreating or something. Then, each player alternates picking a melee combat they want to do. Now, if you pass, you're basically saying to the other person, I'm okay if you pass, we won't fight anymore. Same as with the movement. As you do melee combats, you'll be putting red markers on both units involved in the combat, so they can't get involved in another combat. Well, they can't attack. So if you attack an enemy unit, you kind of pin it down and make it so it can't fight. It doesn't cost any command points to do melee. Your steps are going to be you designate the unit that's attacking, and I assume the defender. Combat units that have a strength of 0 can't attack. If they defend, they act as though their combat strength is 1. And that's important because there's multiples going on. There's going to be multiplication in this. The attacking player then selects a defending unit. That defending unit has to be in their front arc. Okay, so purple could attack red here in this situation. But red could not attack purple. Alternatively, they can attack each other here, or whatever. But there's a further restriction. If you got somebody right in front of you, that's the only thing you can attack. So if you had this kind of situation, for example, you could not attack this light cavalry that you are hitting in the rear because you got these, I don't know, M&Ms in front of you. I don't know what those mean. Maybe we should look up the different types. MM. I cannot even guess. It must be infantry type, which is over here. Yeah, mixed missile. Guess sort of like the Roman legionaries who throw their javelins and then hit. Okay. And you're not going to be tracking ammo or anything like that in this game. Alright, so where are we? Retreat before melee. So, certain light units, in particular light infantry, which is the LI or LA, which LA I think is light archers, are able to run away from other infantry type units. And light cav of any type is allowed to run away from anything that's slower than it. And to do this, for example, if I was able to attack this, and I can attack it here because I got nothing in front of me, so I can hit out that side. If I wanted to run away here, I would just move 1 hex. But I face directly away from the enemy, so even if I was facing like this, I would turn like this and run 1 hex. And then the attacker is allowed to turn and follow through. And then both people are actually marked with the red marker. And no combat happened, but I chased. I need not advance after combat unless it's specified that I must through. There are presumably rules that allow that. But let's assume the melees are going to happen. Well, this is where it gets complicated. I've read it, but until I start playing it, it's not going to be in on me. But if I explain it, I think it will. So, let's see what we got here. First, you calculate the base melee strength. This is going to be the combat strength of the units. Okay. And this is modified by 1 for each leader that has a bonus of +1. Now, leaders have different values. You can see, for example, this one has a +1. This one has a ×2. Alright, so +1s add to your base strength, base melee strength. There are multiple different strengths, you got to keep track of them all. The combat's base strength multiplier is then going to be calculated. You get 1 point for the unit. Okay, 1 times whatever the strength is will be the strength. You get 1 for each leader that has a ×1, 2 for each leader that has a ×2. Leaders stack for this. They're very valuable. You get +1 if the unit is cavalry effective. I'll show you that. That's this little marker in here in the strength indicating there's it looks kind of like a little house actually. That'll give you +1 if you're in melee against a cavalry type unit attacking or defending. And it doesn't matter which way you're facing. That value is going to be a multiplier, the base strength multiplier. Remember, 1 point for your unit, 1 for multiplication, leaders, etc. That's going to multiply your base melee strength. And between them, that creates your modified melee strength, okay? The amount of strength points you have times your multiplier value, which will be at least 1. There's no minuses on this. From that, we're going to calculate a final melee value of each unit. And then we have some die roll modifier markers, and I got to find these, but they're in here, that give you a multiplier and a plus. And these can be used on the record tracks. We've got some gameplay examples in there we can look at. Well, you can look at if you own the game, or look at the rules online. Now, the attacker and the defender are both going to roll a single die for their base combat value. This is something different. This is not their base strength or modified melee strength. This is their combat value. Different idea here. Now you skip this if an elephant is attacking. Compare the attacking and defending units' modified melee strengths as determined before. The numbers we calculated out by multiplying. If they're equal, we're not going to have a modifier. Otherwise, the person who has the higher odds between those gets pluses, okay? So if I have 1 strength point more than you, I get a +1. If I have twice as many strength points as you, I have a +2. It's the reductum ad absurdum type idea for modifiers here. But you can only do a +1 if the guy with the lower melee strength is in the zone of control of the unit with the higher, which means you can't get a +1 advantage if you're being attacked in the rear. Okay, that's not the only approach thing. We're going to see we get modifiers from the direction a little later on. But that's one factor of this. And this modifier cannot exceed +10. Alright. We go through some examples. The terrain. Now, after this modifier, which can't exceed +10, is determined, then you go for the melee modifications for the terrain. And that goes for attacker defender holding various terrain. And that affects both sides, as do the hex sides between, down here. And you also get a bonus based on the approach direction. So if you're coming in the rear, you get a +4. Now this is the important number, right? The other number was just your strength, and that's to determine your odds ratio, which gives you 1 modifier there. You add these combat modifiers to the base combat value that you rolled on a die. Okay, so your odds ratio and all these other factors are added here, and each side then gets a final melee value. And you compare those. And you compare those over here on the melee combat table. And so if the defender is greater than twice the attacker is eliminated. And so on. The attacker greater than 3 times the defender is eliminated. Number of different results here. EN is, I guess, engaged. which means the good ordered units become disordered, and the disordered units simply remain disordered, continuing the fight. Okay. Eliminated units are removed from play. Good ordered combat strength is then deducted from the panic rating. Advance after combat may happen here. Okay. If a leader is stacked with a combat unit that's eliminated, he has to roll a die. On a 1, bad things happen. He's dead. If he's still alive after that and somebody enters his hex, the leader is removed from the board. He'll be available next turn. He's not dead. If the leader's dead, well, if the last leader's dead, the army panics. Here's another thing, though. The number of leaders you have affects the amount of command points you have. So as your leaders start wiping out, you're going to have less and less ability to do things, and you also lose the bonuses that they provide in combat as well as creating formations. Disciplined troops. There's an exception if a victorious attacker's movement is allowance is in a black box. The unit is disciplined and the unit has an option to advance after combat. Okay, so normally you must advance after combat as the attacker. The defender never does, but these black box units have the option not to. Your advancing must be done straight, which means if I'm attacking like this and I force you to retreat, I have to turn and follow you. I can't do a sidestep. Now you can kind of mimic sidestepping in this game in your normal movement. I got a free turn, I move, I got a free turn, okay? But then I got to move forward on my next move if it's in that activation. Later, if it's on another activation, well, then I can't remember that. Everybody who's in the combat gets a red marker. They can't attack again. All right, so that's how battles are handled. What else do we have? We have some special stuff that I'm going to touch on more as we hit them. But let's take a look at the end of the game stuff, and then the rest of the stuff is really going to be per scenario, and we'll look it up as that happens. I need to plug myself in. My camera, the battery is getting kind of old, and it's not working as well. A lot of problems with this thing. Someday I'll have to buy a new one, I think. I don't know what will happen when that happens. All right, let's look at the end of game check and advance the game turn marker. You move the game turn marker forward. If it has a little die marker in there, you're going to roll to see if the game ends in general. If you roll less than or equal to that value, the game ends, and then you figure out who won. You remove all the action markers. There should only be red ones on the board here. Camps and war wagons, I'm not going to talk too much about them. I think they're in every battle. Yeah, let's talk about them a little bit. What the hell? We got a lot of time left here. So they can't move. They have a 360-degree facing. They can never melee, but they do have the ability, if you look at here, to fire missiles. And this little thing says they can't be hurt by missile combat. And another effect to them is if you eliminate them in combat, you then end up looting them, and you're destroyed too. Now, what it does not say there is whether or not that happens due to missile fire. I think yes. The lead unit would run up and ransack the camp. Well, no, it can't happen during the missile pile. Excellent. Okay, so you can only win it. You can only take it out by actually physically attacking it. And if you do that and you win the battle, you end up being destroyed along with it because you are looting the battle. Neither of these losses are going to affect the panic level, however. So you're not hurt by looting except in losing the battle. A leader with a unit that's eliminated due to looting goes back behind into your player's side so that you can put him back next turn. He doesn't run away. For victory conditions, it's very, very simple and small. The person with the most victory points wins. Here's your designation. Basically, your goal is to get 3, but 1 will give you a marginal victory. And you get victory points for causing the enemy to panic, 1. Eliminating a camp, 1. A glorious slaughter, having twice as many strength points on the map as your opponent when the game ends. This is kind of interesting because some battles may start out unbalanced, and that feels a little weird to call it a glorious slaughter. The system may not, the actual scenarios for the game may not cover this, but it does seem a little strange for, I don't know, something like Montgessard to end up, hey, it's a glorious slaughter if the weak guy doesn't attack. That, in Montgessard, that may make sense, but in some battles you have a weaker side sitting in a highly defensible position, and they would be forced to attack by this, so you'd have to have special rules for that. And then the fourth point that's available to you is going to be, you might get one at the beginning of the scenario. Now, there's rules for the specific scenarios here. It gives you the panic levels, etc. And then back here there's a set of optional rules, which I'll very briefly go over because I'm not going to use most of these. Yeah, I know, I wanted to stop earlier, but whatever. Free deployment. You have some limitations, but you're allowed to deploy in an ahistorical way. I won't be using that. Luck versus skill. It modifies the die rolls. 1s become 3s, 6s become 4s. Again, try to flatten the curve out. Ancient battles were very, very random, so I certainly don't want to do that. Barbarian charges and command control. I'm going to touch these very, very briefly, and I'll explain them more as the scenarios actually happen. Basically, barbarian charges are to make the barbarian light infantry a little more effective. They're allowed to triple their combat strength, but it's once per game, and it's all the barbarian infantry at once. So you got to do this mass attack to do that, and you just use it, and then it's gone. Now, you can choose to save it unless following command control. Command control is the other optional, which is for knights and barbarians. And this one I don't quite understand. You total your leaders. This is going to give you your command control rating. Essentially, you're going to roll a die to see if you're in command. If you're out of command control, then all your units prior to any activation have to charge towards the enemy unit, which the closest it can become adjacent to. This is going to cost you no command points. The units get a yellow activation marker. They've done something. It wasn't maybe what you wanted them to do. They have to keep moving closer. If they have to go through a friendly unit to get to their opponent, yeah, they do so, and they're both disordered, and too bad, they keep fighting. They cannot leave the map. Okay, so now this is weird. When subject to command control, they cannot voluntarily leave the map unless allowed by special scenario rules. I think that is not the failure to command control. I think that's that knights and barbarian have such high morale that they will not run. However, impetuous units that currently have lost command control, this is something separate. They have a -1 missile defense modifier. They're more likely to get hurt by missiles. Hack and slash during melee, they do all their melee attacks first, which means if they hit things that are weak, they're going to hurt them before those things get any chance to do any damage back. Okay, elephants. If elephants are in this, and I assume they are, you're able to spend a command point to try to frighten all the enemy elephants that haven't gotten an action marker yet. And you roll on this die and see what happens. And the elephant might get stopped for the turn, or it might even turn around on your side and attack its friendly troops. Dismounted cavalry, you have the option to replace your cav with these units. I will be using the historical setup, whatever that is. If they tell me in it that the cav was historically dismounted, then I will historically dismount it. But it gives you some more flexibility again towards these scenarios. There aren't a whole lot, but you get a nice little handful here. 8 scenarios. You can't complain too much about that. All right. Well, we're going to see. I have some trepidation here, as always, with small games. And something that I just feel with VPG is this kind of fear. This is going to be too much like that chess game where you can count up what you can do a little too well. But what this may end up being is a very nice high-level view of these battles. Not that broad span that I generally like, but a few pieces, simpler, easier to play, but still gives you some of that chaos of an ancient battle. That's what I'm hoping to see in it, and I suspect I will. But we'll see. The reason I suspect I will is I don't think they would have contacted me and asked me to review something if it was going to be always this chess-like game. Personal view here, personal guess here. Things like No Retreat, and that's a fantastic game, by the way, up there. Is of that chess-like variety, right? Some of the States of Siege ones, you're figuring out what your odds are, and you're calculating what your chance of success is in any given strategy. Hero of Weehawken, a little bit more random. But anyway, that's the few that I've looked at so far. Up this one goes.